Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Point Three podcast. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Please stay. We'd love to have you. If this is not, welcome back. Remember, subscribe if you haven't already. We are your favorite trio of hosts. To my right, you have Spider Brando, below Funko Lou, and myself, Hero Scroll. Today, we're going to be talking about the preference that still gets talked about to this day, the endless debate of what is better for superheroes. Is it animation or is it live action? A lot of people, though, are going to be leaning one way or the other. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Which side are you on? Let us know down below. But Mr. Funko Lou, if someone asked you this in 2024, if you were to get a project of your dreams or a project to rewatch, are you picking something animated or are you going live action?
It's easy. Every single time, 10 out of 10. I am picking animation. No doubt. Two examples I'll give you: Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm going to throw it out there with the newly refreshed, reminted X-Men 97 trailer that we just got from Marvel Animation. Listen, you can go back and watch 30 years ago animation, 20 years ago, 10. Every single decade is going to give you something that stands up today based on the source, based on the people that are putting the time and effort into it. Live action, I don't know. You may get it, you might not get it. There's going to be a list of stuff from animation, though, that can just change your life. And we're not talking anime, but just strictly, if we're going Western animation, no doubt in my mind, I would be satisfied if my world turned to look like that from here on out. So, sorry, live action team, animation should be the future.
Fair points, fair points. Spider Brando, what are you picking?
It's hard because I love both mediums. Animation has been way more consistent, so going live action.
Oh.
It's overall, we've had more. I'm gonna eat my words saying this, but I feel overall we've had more impacts from film and the way stuff is being made based on live action progress over the past couple of years. But
you see this shirt right here? One of these characters had good live action adaptations, and the other one is the most butt you will see on your screen. A part of the greatest cinematic universe, Sony. These two are match made in heaven in the animated world. I'm just saying.
They are. Well, we haven't seen them too much. We've only had one iteration of them truly together, live action. That's 2007. And now I'd like to see how it would be in current technologies. As much as I love animation and all that, like Invincible, Across the Spider-Verse, probably my best, highest rated Spider-Man movie animation. I don't know, there's just something about live action that just has more of a connecting to the real world type story for me, just because I feel it a little more. I'm not saying animation is bad, obviously.
That's a good choice. No, that's fair. That's fair. All right. It's 1-1. So Hero Scroll, you got to break the tie for the Point 3 podcast here.
Oh man, I really wish I could just say both, but I can't because we have to pick one. What I will say is that I do understand that there are pros and cons to both, right? However, I think there are typically less cons towards the animation side of things. So I will go with animations. And I'll say that because normally when you have a live action project, people have played up their expectations and kind of what they want to see for so long. For example, I think if the first X-Men project were to be a live action, a lot of people would be disappointed because having been over, I think at this point, almost like over 5 years since a good X-Men movie, people are already hyping it up what it'll look like with the MCU twist, what those suits are going to look like, because more than likely they're going to look great. But you really only get one shot to doing that right. And I look back at X-Men Apocalypse, and specifically Apocalypse's design. People played that up for so long because of animation. And let's be honest, his comic design is just one of the best out there.
Yeah.
That when we got what we got, I mean, it's still torn to shreds to this day. Animation lets you really,
I was gonna say I have another prime example of that. That's not too much with superheroes, but just think of how much the studio got bullied from Sonic 1.
Mhm,
How bad that iteration was.
for
But
sure.
then they listened and came out with a banger.
Yeah, for sure. So people play that up, and with animation, you get kind of that leeway where I feel like, again, using X-Men 97 as an example, Mohawk Storm, I think in live action would be a hard sell for people because they typically have, even though, yes, Mohawk Storm is a comic accurate thing, a lot of people have her in mind with, her normal full head of hair. But because in animation, you can get away with it, make it do things and make her and the situations around her look cooler without having the over reliance of things like CGI, you now get away with things like that. Not only that, with live action, it really comes down to the actor
Mm-hmm.
portraying the character and making them feel like they are that character. The greatest example, I think, coming out of the MCU, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man.
Yeah.
He feels like Iron Man. But if you get the actor for any of these projects wrong, that character's stock immediately drops or plummets incredibly hard.
Can we throw Kang in there?
Yeah.
I know that's not exactly right. However, they're tied together. Like that's it.
Yeah.
You know?
One really good example, there's two good examples that I'll say where how it can make or break your character. One that made the character, besides RDJ, Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch. Obviously, it depends on the writing, but the feel that she brought for the character, I mean, elevates the character so very high. Unfortunately, one that their stock has plummeted, and I still would say is really low in comparison to where it should be, Brie Larson's Captain Marvel.
Sure.
She should feel better and bigger than what she feels like, and she still feels like a D tier character in a world where she should be an ace. With animation, you don't have to worry about that as much because you just get a very good voice actor and you make the what the visuals cool. It does matter who you get, but you get a lot more leeway.
Well, in to that point though, and you guys know this, especially when we went there and we looked at the script when they released it for Across the Spider-Verse. Those screenplays, that story that they're telling, there's a lot more detail that goes into it, and it's not as reliant on the director-actor relationship to really portray that story being told for us to really connect with them. The one thing animation I think will have, and we're seeing it a lot more with anime, as that's kind of coming in from, and it's becoming bigger on the Western side of things, at scale in movie theaters, whatever might be streaming. You have the ability to tell a longer story, a deeper story, a more interesting story, a more intricate story, and all those factors that people look for of setting and costume and art and all those types of things. Those are hashed out. Like those are nailed for the most part. And I think when we see a visually striking animation like what we saw with X-Men 97, or with Across the Spider-Verse, and I think Gwen right in the beginning, all of those things helped create and made Gwen an MVP for how many people? I mean, I know for us included here, like that was such a sticking point, but it added to her story in a way that live action would never ever be able to do. And they told a story that when you look at the source, those two connect and they're much closer in their overall ending delivery and feel that you get than anything we've gotten from live action. We haven't gotten Gwen really in that Spider-Gwen form yet to this point. And if we did, would it be up to snuff? Maybe, maybe not. But animation just gives you an entire world to play with that the MCU specifically, they don't really go down that route of kind of fantasy, and everything's very logical and very grounded and makes sense and it feels very earthy. You know, they don't go that far outside of the scope to push boundaries. So I mean, animation just let you can be anything, do anything, anywhere, anytime. And to me, with superheroes, that's the essence of what I'd want to see, because I'm going to get something that's going to blow my mind more than not.
Playing the mediator though between the two of like live action and animation though, and maybe Spider Brando, you can kind of speak to it more than me. But when live action hits, when you get those moments of like dream come true type stuff, it's one of the best feelings out there.
Oh, I mean, dude, that's
100%.
but that's my thing. Real quick, Spider-Man, I'm curious what you think of that though, because for live action though, I feel like those moments hit more because we don't experience them as often. Where animation, when high is a high, it's a 15 out of 10, but for the most part, a lot of things can hover around that 9 to 10. Live action, you get some stinkers. And when you get a 6, you're like, oh no way, this is 6. Like, this is great. And then you get to your 10s and 9s and stuff like that. But it feels almost more like the exception versus the rule when it comes to live action, which can be a draw for a lot of people.
One thing I could say to that is purely because just the budgets, it's so much easier to get all these iterations of animated superhero stuff and to make it right, because they've had so many different attempts. Right, like you said earlier, live action's got that one shot. When that one shot hits, it does in fact hit. Like, just think of Captain America for perfect example, Endgame, saying Avengers Assemble for the first time. How many times has that dude said it in the comics and like Earth's Mightiest Hero? So much. But when you see it on the big screen, wow, that shit hit. And like I said earlier, not all live action is superior. Not all animation superior than live action. They obviously have their ups and downs. Like I just saw Madam Web yesterday. That shit is definitely not better than anything animated that I have ever seen. Like, not even close. But it was cool to see them attempt a live action version of it, and some parts that kind of worked, a lot that doesn't. But to me, I'd still likely prefer just seeing live action stuff.
Do you guys think it's more of that, like that sense of realism, that sense of it's a tangible thing? Cap saying Avengers Assemble is like, he could be sitting next to me. Like Chris Evans literally could be in a room saying those types of things, right? And I'm like, finally, for the first time I've seen it, when it's so common, like you had mentioned in animation, and like you're saying something iconic from these other mediums, but you or I could say that on screen. You know, like I could wear that suit, I could have that shield, I could tighten, that belt type of thing.
I'd say yeah, in certain ways of it. It works both ways, right? It's kind of that double-edged sword that we've talked about in various other topics, where a little kid can see themselves lifting up Thor's hammer, right, and being like, yo, that's me. But I also think, for example, one iteration of a thing that wouldn't work in live action going into one of the most popular animated is Into the Spider-Verse. Miles' first suit is his like spray painted suit that he spray painted over a Spider-Man. And in the movie, it looks amazing because the way they were able to animate it and get the lines and whatnot. In live action, I don't think that would translate well.
Mm-mm.
It would look a little odd, I guess you could say, and kind of splotchy in certain parts, especially when you know how spray paint is. And yes, you know, they could reason that he's one of the best artists out there, but I still think it wouldn't work as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then having something tangible that a kid can see and visualize themselves in will always win out a little bit over.
But even think about like across the Spider-Verse and how many relatable elements were in that show to where people are like, I felt live action was put into animation. You know, I felt like my everyday was put into that. And that's why I think it appealed to such a large audience, is because it felt like I could have been them. And I think that's what more highly successful, highly functioning animated series, movies, and shows are doing. And I think that's like the new gold standard. We saw on TMNT doing that. We know Sonic is coming out. A lot of this stuff, the way that they're doing it with the new technology and effects and CGI and just teams that are surrounding these projects. The one biggest differentiator that I'll say here for this last piece is I know that there are a lot of great people that work on live action projects for sure. But there's just something different about these animated movies, especially in modern times. The amount of care and the amount of times you hear people say, hey, guess what? We're going to delay this because we want the best thing forward. Hey, we're not releasing this, on March 20th now. We're going to delay it a year because this is going to be the best thing that's possible. And we're going to tell the best story. And you feel that every time because it comes out and you're just like, man, banger. Or you get something fun like a Super Mario Brothers that's just a full nostalgia play that you're not going to get live. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to happen. I just would prefer to live in that world of overall enjoyment, and I can walk away and disconnect. Right now, I don't feel like I can disconnect from live action, and I don't see that changing anytime in the near future.
The one time I feel like I was able to disconnect though was No Way Home.
Fair.
And the only reason I would say that is because ultimately I think a lot of people who are making these movies live action and whatnot are starting to realize that animation is getting bigger and bigger here in the States, and realize we need to start taking certain elements of that and putting it within our projects, to where even if we want to tell a more grounded, realistic story, sometimes you just have to have those crazy superhero moments that could only happen in a superhero movie. And in No Way Home, I think the best example of that is when all three Spider-Man start swinging and they jump off the scaffolding, and Tom, I think it's Tom, he grabs the other two with his webs and he slings them forward. That's something you would only see in anime or animation. But they took that and said, here you go, have fun. And it's one of the sickest looking things ever.
Do you guys feel that though? There's a camp and a group of people who say, hey, that's great, but 99% of that was special effects and CGI. And it didn't really come back to a live action movie until they landed, then took their masks off and they're like, action. And he's like, woo, oh, wow, crazy times, right, guys? I just took my mask off. It's me. That wasn't me. Does that level of technological advancements take away from that live action feel and just kind of shift that preference to be like, maybe animation is what I actually do like. I just prefer to see human being after certain moments. Because Spider-Man, if your wheels are turning on that one, I can throw it back to Hero.
I don't know.
Because at what point does it all just kind of like shift? You know what I mean? And like the best parts of these are parts that aren't even actually human beings doing it, but that's what people like the most.
I feel like my whole argument is invalid.
No, not at all. It just depends on who you are as a person, right? And how you want to view these things because
Yeah.
while yes, it is computerized when whatnot, the skeletal bones of that, especially in animation, watching certain behind the scenes stuff, they take the actors and the movements and their motions and just find a way to visually manipulate that and make it look cool and something that we don't see normally. And I think of the Matrix and the Matrix 2 back in 2000 and whatnot. That was not heard of before. That's why it was so successful. And obviously, if you look at the Matrix, no one's going to do the things they do. No one's dodging bullets in time like that. Keanu did not sit there and they said, "Hey,
Oh, he for sure
lean
did.
all the way back, dodge these bullets. You only get one take." By the way, no, that was computerized, and we to this day, I think a majority of people are able to disconnect that and be like, "No, that's still cool regardless." And I think the same thing with this. It just depends who you are, because there's going to be people who are like, "That was stupid," and when it still looked really cool.
I almost look at it like in a way of like Tom Cruise, where he's like, I do all my own stunts. So when you see it in the movie, you're like, oh damn, like Tom Cruise did that. But then we see, like a Daredevil, and like, is that the stunt double or is that really Charlie Cox doing that? I don't know. And then they break it down. They're like, yeah, no, that wasn't him. It was just we just worked the camera in a really, really cool way to make that Echo fight scene look a lot better than it was. But I'll throw this to you, Spider Brain. People love team ups in the cinematic universe in this big world of multi-layered storytelling, to where we get team ups and crossovers that put your favorite heroes and villains on the same screen and up against one another. And you guys know I'm very passionate about this specific piece of why the MCU is not successful right now, is because the main storyline, the cinematic storyline, is really non-existent. We've all talked about it and expressed our pieces there. For me personally, my thought always goes to, if this was animated, this would not be a problem. I go back to the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon or animated show. They nailed that. And they told all of these storylines that people are complaining about today, such as Secret Wars or Secret Invasion, all that kind of stuff. So when I hear cinematic universe, my personal wish would be it is an animated cinematic universe. Pool all your resources into that. Tell us that story across 5+ years and give us the greatest version of that adaptation you possibly can. So my question is, if Marvel or DC were to come down and say, "Hey, we're going to give you a cinematic universe, but it's going to be all animated," would you? It's in replacement of our live action. Would you be for that or against that?
If it's good, I'm gonna be for it. I'm not like I said, I'm not against animated stuff. I feel like it would be a little weird if they were to just like obviously swap it like mid mid universe. But if it was something like fresh, like you say James Gunn, just like, yeah, DCU is gonna be like DCAU, I'd be fine with that. Well, disappointed because I'd be like, I want to see live action Superman and Batman, and like we've been seeing cartoons of them for all 25 years growing up. I mean, I've seen a live action of them 25 years growing up too, but to me, it's easier to differentiate live action stuff because each live action thing really tries to have its own appeal and a look to it, whereas the cartoons just different little shade of blue and a little hexagon coding hashtag like those FF things, a little bit designs. And live action get usually whole different like styles to differentiate from previous work. I'd be for it, but it'd be an adjustment to see a fully animated one. Technically, didn't the DCAU wasn't that kind of like that? Like where they're all connected back with like Justice League, the Batman shows, Superman shows.
Kind of, but like more
I
from
know
the
it's not
standpoint
like
of like
yeah.
MCU, how they're
Oh
doing
yeah,
it,
yeah.
DCEU, like all that stuff happens, but it's animated.
Here's what I will say
Alright.
to kind of close this out. I think ultimately what these studios need to realize is there's room for both. And I think that's kind of what this conversation has also shown us. There's room for live action, there's room for animation. Live action has its place. And I think animation is slowly getting up there further and further. And movies like Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse are bridging that gap and showing studios that if you do the right things with these animated movies and you cater to the right audiences, you do it well, you show that there's love and passion as much as a live action movie, people will come to this. And I can't wait to see the day where they bridge the gap. And something that we see animated is important to something that we see live action, both of which come out at a movie theater and not just at home on a streaming service.
Come on, James Gunn, don't let us down now. Don't let us down now. We'll see. We'll see. Just in a few years. I mean, what, next year? It's going to be the first kind of trial run of that.
Yeah.
To be mainstream, but I don't know. It's exciting. Listen, if you guys enjoyed this conversation, let us know which side, if there is a side. There's a third option here. Both. You know, what do you prefer? What's your preference? Animated? Do you like live action? Is it a combination of the two? And which characters would you want to see, either or, that you haven't seen animated or live? So let us know. Drop it in the comments below. But everyone, we appreciate you. If you liked what you saw and heard, subscribe to the channel here. Join us Wednesdays 9:05 Eastern for our Wednesday live streams. And everyone, there's 3 extremely important things that you have to do. You must do. And that is keep reading, keep watching, and keep nerding out.